Skeletor. Oh, buddy. I've been moving all of the horses around getting ready for winter in Montana. Skeletor was having a really hard time, so I decided to give him his own private space in the barn. After a night to recover from the other horses pushing him around, he looked a lot happier the next day. All of the horses that I keep in the barn for the winter get turned out twice a day, even though they do have a small run attached to their stall. Skeletor's stall is next to Studman's stall. Studman was actually out in the geldings herd and I brought him in because he needed a diet. These two shared turnout time together last winter, so I'm pretty sure they will not take very much to get reacquainted. This morning I'm going to turn them both out in the arena and feed them a little piece of their breakfast out here, just so they can stretch their legs and hang out. Even though Skeletor is the biggest horse that I have, he does have trouble fitting in with the herd. Unlike all my other horses, he did not grow up in a herd situation, so he has trouble figuring out what the other horses expect of him. I don't know that I've ever actually measured Studman, but I think he's around 13.3, maybe 14 hands if he's standing up nice and tall. When I bought him, he was a stallion with very little handling. He is a gelding now, but he still kind of acts like a stud when he's turned out with the herd. The main reason I bring him in for the winter is he is a little bit aggressive around food, so he'll run the other horses away from the best hay pile, and as you can see from his round belly, he eats probably a lot more than he should. I think Skeletor is still a little bit confused about how to fit in with new horses. He is a very sweet horse, and I think he maybe expects all of the horses to just allow him to do whatever he wants. Studman is the perfect disciplinarian. He's pretty fair, and if Skeletor is bothering him, he's going to let him know that that's unacceptable. I went in the barn and got Scarlet turned out in her round pen for the day, and then I went around to feed everyone. This is Gus. He was in the barn in Skeletor's stall, but I moved him outside because he gets along with the herd very well. He is best friends with Pete, and as soon as I turned him out, him and Pete ran Stewie around for a little bit, so Stewie is at the bottom of the herd again, and he's kind of annoyed about it. You can see here that Mort is chasing him away from his little hay pile. It looks like little Gus has also grown a little bit tired of his shenanigans. I threw out a bunch of extra hay piles today so they could figure out where they were going to be in the herd. Last night was the first night I had the de-icers in the water troughs. They just make sure the water is warm enough so it doesn't freeze. After a few years, I find that sometimes that mechanism stops working, so this tank is pretty warm. If I don't replace it, my electricity bill will be really high. I went ahead and I gave Skeletor and Studman a little snack of hay. It's probably only about 1 pound, but this will be just enough for them to eat while I'm cleaning their stalls. A few people ask why I didn't just turn Skeletor out with Whiplash and Goose. And Whiplash was a stud when I bought him. He was 17 years old and had never been out with a herd. Goose is about the only other horse that will tolerate him. I did turn Studman out with them a little bit this summer and they did well, but he was getting too much grass, so I had to move him. I do have to open a new bale of hay today, so I'm going to clean out the truck. Here's Scarlet. It's supposed to be pretty warm next week, so I might end up leaving her outside both day and night. She really does not like being in the barn. All the leftover alfalfa leaves are perfect for the two really old horses that I have. This little pony is missing teeth and he can't eat the really stemmy parts of the hay. This other horse is almost 30 and he can eat hay pretty well, but he would prefer just to eat the leaves and his mash that I make him. He is the only one that wears a blanket in the winter time because it's harder for him to stay warm being so old. I've had a few people ask me how I handle these gigantic bales of hay, and I push it into the back of this truck. These big square bales are about 1,800 pounds. They're super nice because I have them delivered so I don't have to stack a bunch of hay bales in the barn for the winter, but it is a little bit tricky figuring out the best way to feed it. Every feeding I go through about 5 giant flakes of this stuff. I had calculated that I would feed about 1 big square bale a week for the horses that I have. I am using about 1/4 more of a bale every week than I had anticipated, so it looks like the extra hay that I bought is going to come in handy. When it gets really cold in the winter, I do end up feeding a lot more hay. There was an auction this past weekend that I was gonna go to, but I decided to sit it out because I want to make sure I have enough hay to get through the winter if it's really long. This is Primrose. She will be 5 this upcoming year. I got her from the same sale barn that I got Scarlet from.
Tiny!
It was a whopping 12 degrees this morning, and Tiny took a little while to get up, but she finally came out and was taking a nap in the sun. She is a very sweet cat, but she gets aggressive if you don't pet her long enough in the morning. Tiny does spend a lot of the winter up in the haystack. It gets really warm underneath the tarp. My tack room is also insulated and I have a heater in there, so it warms up pretty nice. She doesn't ever get too cold in the winter. After I spent the necessary amount of time snuggling on her, I went to clean up the stalls and put all of the meals in for the horses that I turned out. For those of you who are asking what kind of de-icers use, they look like this. These are 250 watts, and it's just enough to make sure that no ice gets on the water, but it doesn't raise my electricity bill too much. One of the really nice things about having Skeletor inside is I can feed him double hay, so I gave him 2 hay bags, and I'm going to see how much he actually wants to eat. I would prefer all of the horses get to stay out in the pasture during the winter, but these runs are a really nice size. It does mean a lot more work for me, and as you can see, these turds are rock solid this morning. I usually end up cleaning all the stalls inside when the horses are turned out for breakfast, and then in the evening it's warmed up enough throughout the day that I can clean up everything outside. I did end up getting some very theatrical shots of the inside of my pocket, so you'll have to use your imagination for what stall cleaning looked like, because I literally got 20 minutes of just my pocket. I moved my free fertilizer to my giant manure pile where it will sit for maybe 2 years until I use it again. It looks like all the boys in the big pasture are getting along great. I finished up my morning chores, and then it was time to go get Skeletor and put him back in his stall. There isn't a reliable place around me to get bulk shavings, so I do end up having to buy bags of it at the local supply store, which is pretty expensive. These 2 boys seem to be getting along great, so I decided to bring them in at the same time. Skeletor still needs a little bit of work figuring out how to walk on my left side, but it's something all horses should really know how to do. Both of these boys were really excited to finally eat their actual breakfast. Studman can be a little bit aggressive around feeding time, but he's gotten a lot better. Both him and Skeletor will get their ration balancer. Depending on how much hay Skeletor ends up eating every day, I might have to bump his regular food up just so he's getting everything he needs. Even though he's about to turn 4 years old, he is still growing quite a bit, so I want to make sure I've got everything covered. I'm really glad he's enjoying his own space. The weather is supposed to be really nice next week, so I'll probably get a bunch of these horses started under saddle. Drop a comment below who you are most excited to see be started. Stewie, Skeletor, and Studman are all on the list. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.